all my Kenvians, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discovering Doctor Who. Today I'm going to be watching the episode Smile. And before I get started, let me just reassure you all that I'm not going to be seeing all of the next time on Doctor Who scenes. I'm going to cut it off before there. I just did that in the previous video because I was interested to see what they might show in the coming this season little preview. Did I possibly get spoiled on some things? Probably. But I'm one of those people that keeps in mind that, you know, if I don't know the context of something, I don't really take it as a serious spoiler. So they don't bother me too much in that regard. But that aside, I'm going to get into the second episode of the 10th series. Yes, I'm getting better at being consistent with series and not season. of Discovering Doctor Who. I can't talk. With the episode Smile.
This is steering mode. Well, you don't steer the TARDIS. You negotiate with it.
They are married after all. Or the TARDIS is his wife.
And where you need to be, that's what she needs.
Mommy's dead. Mom is dead. And hopeful. She's dead too. And her friend Sunshine. She's dead.
Not very sunshiny there.
And quite a few other people are dead. Please smile. Oh, you're on 2 tears now. Is it hugging me? Don't put her around there. Please. Give her a moment. You will help me in a moment.
Jesus Christ.
I'm smiling.
But what if you get lost or stuck or something?
I've thought about that. And? Well, it would be a worry, so best not to dwell on it. Look, you know what I really like about humanity? It's optimism. You know, we're learning skills. The work of these is something to revolution. Every just checking us out for security.
These are robots. You can just break robots.
That was the most adorable, creepy face I've ever seen.
Like that. Typical web brain shoulders.
Emoji! It speaks emoji!
Oh my god.
Of course it does.
Oh, it's cute.
Oh my god, it's literally called an emoji bot.
What's that?
Why?
Living things we eat? Algae.
I don't know about it.
What?
Everything is here. Everything is ready. There's no one here.
So shouldn't you do first thing?
You just send them up ahead and you leave them to it.
Yeah, hearts though. Why 2?
Why what?
Why one?
Does that mean you've got really high blood pressure?
Really high.
That's not just because of the 2 hearts, though. Uh-oh. Death mode.
If you chase us, it's moving very slowly.
Do you know what it means when something chases you very slowly?
What?
It means there's a reason that they don't have to run.
Like Michael Myers, because he teleports, but that's beside the point.
Okay. For Witcher / Aberdeen.
Oh my god, that face! Man.
Why are you Scottish?
It's Scottish and just cross. They're all over the place. Demanding independence from every part of the land. Why are you here?
Why you keep your butt as a phone box? Advice and assistance available like that. Why do people come here?
Because they screwed up the earth. I blame Trump. Fight me.
This is look. Look. You took your time. Let this go. It's gonna spin back. I want you to hold it tight while I jam it shut.
Run. Or do that.
Because the party think different. Like the magic Haddock. Not bad, not good, just different. So what will happen?
What is the frickin' magic Haddock?
Your negotiator was a migratory conglomerate known as the Human. Next, they're looking for a place to stay if they've got their eye on your city. Would you like to discuss that? That's up to them.
Oh.
You just...
I'll give the exact moment we left. Kettle's boiling, and with a vault to guard, everything is exactly as we left it.
Either something's gone wrong, or they are very much not. It's snowing now.
Maybe I'll do this steering wheel. London. And this is the Thames.
And there's an elephant. Okay. Oh, no. Haha, stopped it in time. Okay. Holy crap, what an episode. Alright, so I'm going to cut it off here, and I will see you all shortly for the review portion of this video. Hello all my Kenvians, and welcome to the review portion of this video. Let's just get right into it with my favorite parts, because I have quite a few to list here, as usual. Starting with just the intro to the episode, where Bill is critiquing the TARDIS layout, and I feel like, not necessarily the critiquing, but the banter back and forth between Bill and the Doctor is just going to be one of my absolute favorite things this season, or at the very least, a consistent favorite through the episodes, if they keep it up like this. Just because, I mean, especially because Bill is clearly very inquisitive. She's very curious. So the more she asks the Doctor, the more chances we're going to have for some, at least in my eyes, some fun hilarity there. So yeah, just the intro with the criticization, can't talk, of the TARDIS's layout and the chairs being too far back and all that. Loved it. My next favorite part is actually also, I'm stealing a little segment from my Discovering Steven Universe videos, is also my moment of terror, which is when the Vardis eat or disintegrate, or whatever I guess you would consider it, Ketsia and Good Thing. Just, and then all of a sudden just turned into bones. That was a really well done horror element, in my opinion. It was, and those are some of the scariest ones, really, when it's not a long, drawn out death. It's not something that lingers. It's just bam, dead, and there's nothing to show for it except for bones. I thought that was really well done, and pretty much instantly gives you this really just terrifying vibe from these otherwise kind of adorable characters that are the Vardi. Well, the Vardi are really the nanobots, but whatever they're called, like the Emojibots. But moving on from there, and actually speaking of the Emojibots, my next favorite part of this episode was the Emoji Badges. Just the way that it's done throughout the episode. Certain parts of it seemed a bit strange to me, like maybe they could have implemented it a little bit better, but by and large, I thought it was implemented really well, and it just sort of added a bit of a visual humor to us. Well, visual humor, and then also just some little, not necessarily Easter eggs, but just little snippets of what the characters are really feeling or thinking as the scene goes on. And, obviously we get to see it whenever they turn their back to us as the viewer. but especially when the badge on the doctor, whenever he was looking around, it was just like always just very, It was like, you know, that eyebrow up. I love that. I just absolutely loved it. My next favorite part of this episode was when they start to, or rather when the doctor starts to figure out kind of like what all's going on, and he's trying to sort of convince himself that everything is okay, because he asks Bill if what he was talking about was convincing, but did he convince himself? And in that regard, it's like the emoji badge was showing that he thinks something is wrong, or it's like he's still very puzzled, whereas he was previously acting like everything was okay, but obviously Bill could tell the opposite, or tell the truth, because she was able to observe his badge. So it's just like the doctor trying to convince himself, which leads us to my next favorite part, which is the creepy smiling, which is where the doctor figures out how to sort of trick the Emojibots there into thinking that, you know, everything was fine and they were smiling. Because according to, and this is actually true, you know, just the simple act of smiling, whether it's a real, authentic smile or not, I don't know all of the science behind it, but psychologically speaking and chemically speaking, doing that actually releases a bit of, I think it's serotonin, but other chemicals that can actually help to lighten your mood. So by doing that, it's actually scientifically accurate as to it being able to trick those emoji badges into thinking that everything's okay, which obviously led the Emojibots to be confused, which was all kinds of hilarious, and I love. And actually, well, there was actually one last favorite on here, but I'll throw that on at the end. But moving on from there, oh no, actually, I'm sorry, I read wrong. My next favorite part comes right after that, which it had been in some earlier parts of the episode too, because if you watch the reaction, I was clearly cracking up. But the confused / frustrated / perplexed emoji faces from the Emojibots, just the it's they were implemented so well, and I don't know if it was the intention of the people behind this episode to have that be funny, or if it was supposed to just be, you know, part of this emoji and just the bizarreness of it all is supposed to be creepy. But for me, those faces added some levity to, you know, clearly an otherwise rather serious situation. You know, clearly the doctor and Bill aren't going to find it funny, but just to go from like these evil skull faces and like these tear crying emojis, which clearly signify the skull faces are about to occur, to this like frustrated it was so good. I honestly think that may be my favorite part of this episode, which, you know, there's a lot of good things to talk about, but just that face is oh, does an emoji of that actually exist? And if so, can I get a mask of it? Because that would be amazing. But moving on from there, my next favorite part of the episode is when Bill realizes that essentially the doctor is the Helpline. I mean, this is something that's been in its own way established over and over again in previous seasons. The doctor, in this case, because of his oath, whatever that is having to resist the urge to go around and help. So, and well, because of past events, he doesn't see himself as being a helper exactly. He's just kind of there. But the idea that he, you know, he is the helpline. He's the one that people go to when they need help. He is the policeman in this situation, so to speak. This is, I really like that idea, and I like the way they had Bill come about it in this regard. Again, I know it's not exactly a new concept. It's something that has been hit on in its own way previously with other companions, but again, I do like the way that they brought Bill to the realization here. My next favorite part is when Bill comes upon the old woman with the digital book. And I was almost going to make one part of this an annoyance, but the super thick book that opens up and it's just a tablet, is that really necessary? Like, was it necessary to be such a thick book when it could have just been a regular sized book and it's like it has all that stuff? Or maybe it's implied to mean it has a gigantic hard drive. I don't know. But yeah, but that being aside, the finding that I thought was really interesting, and especially what it ended up leading to, which is one of my another favorite part I'm going to touch on in a minute. One rather confusing thing that did confuse me though is when Bill walked up to the woman and the little emoji badge popped up. It showed the emoji having open eyes, but then an X over the mouth, which led me to think that she was alive, she just couldn't speak, or she was in a kind of a cryogenic stasis or a coma even. So the fact that she was dead, I don't know, it's just, it felt like the emoji was a bit misleading, but at the same time, given what we find out afterward, early as explained by the doctor, it does kind of make sense. But anyway, it's like, so yeah, that was one of my favorite parts. It was just this really, but it was rather confusing for me at the moment. But I'll come back around to that in just a second. My next favorite part was the pod people, or the pods. And this one's a really stupid reason because it just gave me the idea to call them pod people. And that's really it. Sorry. I know that's a stupid one, but he's like, the pods, people come out of it, they're pod people. I'm a dork. Alright, so moving on from there, and to go back to the old woman and everything, is when the doctor makes the realization that what's going on is that the settlement experienced grief because of the loss, the natural death of this woman, and that grief became a plague because the Emojibots and the Vardi weren't able to process that completely. Which, again, also makes sense in the fact that the emoji was not able to express death, or the emoji badge, because I guess that wasn't programmed into their systems, I guess. Which leads me to questions in and of itself, but since it didn't have a concept of death, like it didn't have anything like, you know, X's over the eyes to signify that in the emoji, it makes sense that maybe the robots just thought that she was sleeping or just couldn't talk. So the fact that people started experiencing grief because of that was such a foreign concept to them. I'm sure it goes in a lot deeper, and, you know, my ramblings rarely make a lot of sense, but I just really like the way all that came about, the idea of grief as a plague. Moving on to my next favorite part is the realization from the doctor that the Vardi are a self-aware new species, or a new sentient life form, shall we say. And I found that concept really, really cool. Because, I mean, there's so many sci-fis about, you know, the aspect of humans creating robots or other artificial, other beings of the artificial intelligence that become sentient, learn how to feel, and especially when the one Emojibot or the Vardi identifies as being attacked and like is planning to take revenge, or, you know, wants revenge on the humans that seemingly killed the other Emojibot. I just found that so fascinating, and I found it to be a rather clever take on what is admittedly a kind of old concept. I mean, let's face it, again, a lot of sci-fi novels, a lot of sci-fi movies, shows, like I said before, have used that concept. I just found this one to be a clever use of that old concept. Moving on from there, my next and final favorite part of this episode was finally the reveal of what the frickin' magic Haddock meant. Which, you know, in long story short, was basically hitting the reset button. That story that the Doctor told, I feel like I've heard something similar to it before. Not necessarily that story, but it's something along those lines. But I am glad at the very least that it was actually something, and not just something random that the Doctor was saying to be silly. Because, I mean, that's happened before. There's usually a meaning behind the things that he's saying, but it's not always, like, fully explained like it was here, which I'm definitely glad it was in the end. But, yeah, the reset button, or turning it off and on again, as they say in the IT crowd. IT crowd, the show, and IT crowd, you know, working in IT. So there you go. Alright, so those are all my favorite parts of the episode. Moving on to my annoyances, I do have a few, or, well, several, shall we say. Starting with my first annoyance, which... They seriously called it an Emojibot. Well, and I guess that's the official name because according to Amazon X-Ray or whatever it is, like they referred to them as Emojibots. So again, I don't know if that's the official name of those or if that was just sort of a name for those, even though they're technically the Vardy. But an Emojibot. I mean, God knows what we're going to call emojis next. Like, they used to be emoticons or just smileys, and now they're emojis. God knows what they'll be now. I just find it strange that they would conceptually still call them emojis that far in the future. I don't know. This is something that kind of annoys me, and kind of dates the episode, potentially, unless, who knows, emoji may be a word that carries on forever. It's hard to say. The English language is stupid. But moving on from there, my next favorite part, or I'm sorry, my next annoyance with this episode was that Bill's grief with the evacuation of Earth, like the concept of Earth being evacuated. Because it's clear that it's like, you know, she's watching this video and she's wondering what's going on. Or what happened? What was it that caused the humans to leave Earth? And, you know, are these the last possible hope? And then it's just very brushed over. Like, it's not mentioned later in the episode, or it's not even says, like, you know, shows that Bill is like, you know, it was still kind of bothering her, but she was getting over it. It was just kind of like, it happened in that moment. These are the surviving people, but they're still alive, so okay, whatever. It felt really brushed over for me. It's sort of a minor detail, but it was something I noticed in the end. Moving on from there, my third annoyance with this episode was that after the reset, or maybe it was it supposed to be an EMP of sorts? I don't know. But basically when the Doctor hit the reset button, why was the kid suddenly very okay with the robots? He was very upset. He didn't know what was going on. He may not know yet that his mother or his grandmother is dead, but it's just like it was a very stark turn from, you know, fearing for his life, about to get murdered by these Emojibots, to all of a sudden sitting down and having a drink that's being served to him by the bots. It seemed really strange that it just went there all of a sudden. Like, the kid wasn't, like, confused at all. He just seemed very at peace. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like that was just kind of poor writing, or maybe they just didn't really think about it all that much. I have no idea, but I'm sure I'm overthinking it, so I'll move on from there to my final annoyance. Which was, despite the fact that I like the idea of grief as a plague and causing all of this, I find it really hard to believe that there was no grief or sadness on this settlement until the death of the old woman. Because especially if these people had evacuated Earth and they were the new people on this planet, surely someone would have had, like, homesickness, the fact that they had left their planet, that they would never be going back to it, you know, missing their family that was still in the chambers. Like, surely there would have been some form of grief or sadness that would have, I don't know, caused the Vardy to identify these emotions before, you know, what happened. That's probably at least in my eyes, the biggest plot hole for this episode. While I do find, like, the concept and everything that happened to be really cool and interesting, it feels like there's that plot hole there that is really hard to look over for me. It's like, because of how complex emotions are and how humans are in general, I can't believe that no one expressed grief to that point, or at least some form of sadness that even kind of resembled grief. I don't know. Again, that's just me. But those are my favorite parts and my annoyances for this episode. If you have any of your own you would like to share that I didn't mention, please do leave them in the comments down below. And also, I would love to hear your thoughts on what I had to say. I realize, as always, I rambled a bit, both in my favorites and my annoyances, but sincerely interested to hear what you all might have to say about each of these. So, okay, moving on from there, I do have a question of the episode. And that question is this: what oath did the Doctor take? Because his explanation of the oath is so vague that it could have been anything. A thing happened, I promised a thing, or so on and so forth. I can't remember exactly what he said. But it was so vague, it's like it could have been anything. And it may have been something that occurred in one of the previous episodes, or even in the last series, that I just don't remember. It's hard to say. But if that is the case, you know, like, it's something that I should recognize, or something that was brought up in those previous episodes, you know, feel free to remind me. But obviously, if it's something that's going to be revealed later in the series, you know, don't spoil it for me here. But it's a huge question of mine. It's like, what is this oath, and when is it gonna come about, and why is Nardole being such a mom? But okay, moving on from the question, I do have a favorite track of the episode. As in, I mean, basically all of the Doctor Who episodes, there are great tracks through and through, but the one that really caught my attention the most was during the scene where the Doctor and Bill come in and the Emojibot is serving them those little blue cubes. There's this very heavy bass line in the background. Like, it's very atmospheric. It's not like super energetic. It's just sort of a boom, boom. Or I'm probably describing it wrong, but it was almost like a techno heavy bass in the background, and just something about that just felt absolutely perfect and really memorable for me. So yeah, that was my track of the episode, if you want to call it that. As always, I'm sure that there are plenty more in this episode that could be named, so if you have any particular tracks you liked, feel free to leave them, you know, in the comments down below, like everything else. Moving on from there, I have a couple of quotes of the episode, and nowhere near all of them, I'm sure. These are just a few that came to mind, and if I tried to do all the quotes that I absolutely loved, this would be like a 30-minute long segment, just the quotes alone. So the three that I preferred, or were my favorite, shall we say. First of all, from the Doctor. Well, you don't steer the TARDIS, you negotiate with it. I just found that to be just a lovely quote. It's not only is it true to a very big extent, but also, I mean, we've seen the personification of the TARDIS, and she is very clearly a living being, and the Doctor has to negotiate with her quite a bit. So, you know, that just really worked a lot for me. My next quote of the episode is, I met an emperor made of algae once. He fancied me. That was just... What? And again, like, if it was one of those things where... I don't know if it's from one of the new episodes and I just don't remember it, let me know. Maybe it's something from one of the classic episodes, or maybe it's just something they completely made up for that line in this episode. However it works, it was a line that really cracked me up. So, yeah, an emperor made of algae, or algae, however they pronounced it in this episode. I call it algae. But then finally, the final quote of the episode comes from both Bill and the Doctor. And I basically quoted it already in the episode, but that is, he turned it off and on again. I turned it off and on again. And it was just glorious. I love jokes about that. Did you try turning it off and on again? Strangely enough, that does work with a lot of things. A lot of computer things. But that's beside the point. Okay, so one last thing before I get into my overall thoughts, and that is a theory, which basically builds on one of the things, or one of my theories from the previous episode, which in the previous episode I said that Bill might betray the Doctor to possibly try and save Heather, was her name? If that comes about. But then during the intro of the episode, when the Doctor says that he stole the TARDIS, and Bill says, well, what if I steal it? Or what if I take it from you? And it's like the Doctor didn't seem super opposed to it. Like, he was almost kind of encouraging it in a strange way. But my theory is, again, playing into the idea of Bill might betray the Doctor in a sense, is that Bill might steal the TARDIS. Again, to possibly try and save Heather. So, yeah. That's my theory for now. Or one of my theories. But okay, as for my overall thoughts on this episode, I thought it was really good. Again, I thought it took an old concept of the artificial intelligence, reworked it in a way that really worked. It took a creature that just seemed ridiculous to me, the Emojibots, and made them threatening and hilarious at the same time. The Vardy as these, I don't know, at first I just saw them as locusts, but the way they work as microbots, there was just so much to this episode that I really, really enjoyed. It does admittedly have some flaws, or at least what I perceive as flaws, but that aside, I really liked this episode, and especially with the way that one ended, with them in London on the Thames, or Thames, however it's pronounced, back in whatever year. Because I'm going to assume that since there's an elephant there, it's in the past. But I'm really interested to see what happens in the next episode. And the next episode is going to be Thin Ice. So, since they said they're on the Thames, I'm guessing the Thames is frozen over, and there's going to be something under the ice. We'll see. But alright everyone, that has been this episode of Discovering Doctor Who. As always, and as I've said several times throughout this episode, if you have any of your own thoughts you want to share, anything you'd like to share about, you know, some of the stuff I've said, please do leave it in the comments down below. I look forward to talking with you, or at the very least reading your comments if I'm not able to respond to it, or if I can't think of anything to say in response. And I will see you all for the next episode, Thin Ice, here on Discovering Doctor Who. Until next time, everyone, allons-y!